The air in the antechamber of the Echoing Crypt was thick with the dust of ages and the faint coppery scent of old blood. Legends spoke of unimaginable treasures, but mostly they spoke of death. Many adventurers entered, none returned. Until, now perhaps, Kaelen, a seasoned rogue, ran a gloved hand over the damp stone, his keen eyes scanning for traps. Cynical and pragmatic, Kaelen trusted only his knives and his wits. He led this desperate party, not out of heroism, but because the bounty on the crypt's fabled heartstone was astronomical, enough to buy him a quiet, forgotten life far from his past. Beside him, Lyra, a paladin of the Sunstone Covenant, clutched her enchanted shield, its polished surface reflecting the dim torchlight. Her compassion was her strength, her fierce devotion her shield. She sought not wealth, but to cleanse the ancient evil rumored to fester within the crypt. Behind them, Jax, a stoic warrior, hefted his massive runic axe. His past was a mystery. His words few, his presence a bulwark. He simply marched forward, an unstoppable force. Bringing up the rear was Alara, a brilliant but untested mage, her spellbook clutched tight. Her hands still trembled sometimes, but her mind was a whirlwind of arcane theory. She believed the crypt held ancient knowledge, forgotten magic waiting to be rediscovered. They were a disparate group, bound by shared ambition and the lure of the unknown. They descended into the darkness, deeper than any had ever gone. The first level was deceptively simple. Winding corridors, a few restless skeletons, and a basic pressure plate trap Kaelen disarmed with a practiced flick of his wrist. Their interfaces, which had activated upon crossing the crypt's threshold, hummed softly in their minds. Kaelen, rogue, HP 100-100, mana 20-20, stamina 80-80, skills, stealth, A, lockpicking, B, dagger combat, B+. Active quests. Locate Heartstone, explore crypt depths. The crypt was a standard dungeon, or so they thought, but its darkness felt heavier, its silence deeper. The party encountered their first true challenge on the second level, a cavern filled with iridescent fungi that pulsed with a faint, hypnotic light. As they navigated the treacherous, narrow path along a chasm, a grotesque Gloomfang horror, all teeth and chitin, burst from the fungal forest. It moved with unnatural speed, aiming for Alara. Lyra roared, her shield deflecting a swipe that would have cleaved the mage in two. Jax moved to intercept, his axe carving a glowing arc in the air. Kaelen vanished into the shadows, seeking a vital strike. Alara, trembling, began to chant a fire spell. The battle was fierce. The Gloomfang was relentless, its venomous bites slowing Jax, its shadowy claws raking Lyra's armor. Kaelen emerged from stealth, landing a critical hit that sent the beast reeling, but not before it spat a glob of corrosive bile. The bile missed Jax, but splattered directly onto Kaelen's boot. He yelped, stumbling back, losing his footing on the damp moss. For a terrifying, elongated second, he windmilled his arms, then plunged into the chasm below with a sickening crunch. Kaelen, rogue, deceased, resurrecting. A blinding flash, a sharp, searing pain, and then Kaelen was back. Not at the bottom of the chasm, but standing beside the rest of his party, who were still fighting the Gloomfang, moments before his fall. It was like time had rewound. The monster was still there, the bile still in the air. But something was different. A new interface overlay appeared, shimmering with arcane energy. Kaelen, rogue, resurrected. Resurrection cost 10% of total gold, 50 gold. Status, success. Warning, dungeon system imprint detected. New permanent curse. Whispers of the Vault, Tier 1. Occasionally hear the whispers of previous crypt victims, giving clues but also causing occasional disorientation. Intellect, 1 for 1 hour after each activation. Kaelen froze, staring at the message. Permanent curse? Whispers? He looked at the others, still fighting. He was back before the fall. His mind reeled. He used his knowledge of the future to avoid the bile, sidestepped, and helped Jax finish the beast. The Gloomfang finally fell, dissolving into wisps of shadow. The others turned to Kaelen concerned. "Are you all right, Kaelen? You looked like you saw a ghost," Lyra asked. "Worse," Kaelen muttered, staring at his flickering interface. "I think I just died." The party huddled, Kaelen explaining what had happened, showing them the new, insidious curse on his interface. The implications were horrifying. This wasn't just a dungeon, it was a living entity, toying with them. Death wasn't the end. It was a punishment, a permanent debuff. "So every time we die, we get weaker?" Alara whispered, clutching her spellbook tighter. That's not how anything works. This crypt is rewriting the rules of reality. "It's an ancient system," Jax rumbled, his voice low. "It feeds on suffering, and it imprints itself on those who die within its walls." "But we need to keep going," Lyra stated, her resolve hardening. "The Heartstone. If it's truly an evil artifact, we must reach it. We simply cannot afford to die." They pressed on, but with a new, terrifying caution. Every trap was meticulously disarmed, every shadow scrutinized. But the crypt was learning, adapting. Its traps became more insidious, its monsters more cunning. On the 4th level, a cavern of shimmering crystals, they encountered a crystal golem. Its attacks were slow, but devastating. Lyra, bravely interposing herself between the golem and the others, took a pulverizing blow. Her health bar plummeted. Lyra, paladin, deceased, resurrecting. Resurrection cost 10% of total gold, 75 gold. Status, success. Warning, dungeon system imprint detected. New permanent curse, sacred burden. Tier 1, healing others. Drains 25% more of your own stamina. Resolve 1 for 1 hour after each activation. Lyra was back, her resolve briefly shaken by the chilling curse. Her healing spells, once freely given, now came at a steeper personal cost. She felt the crypt's weight on her spirit, a subtle whisper that her sacrifices were pointless. Kaelen occasionally heard the whispers of the vault, disorienting him, with fleeting images of forgotten adventurers' despair. The true horror dawned on them. This wasn't just about managing HP. It was about strategically managing their deaths. Who could afford to die next? Which curse was less debilitating? The crypt was forcing them to make impossible choices, eroding their strengths one death at a time. As they delved deeper, the crypt's influence grew more profound. The curses began to evolve. Kaelen's Whispers of the Vault tiered up. Whispers of the Vault, Tier 2. Occasionally hear the whispers of previous crypt victims. Disorientation. Is more severe and may cause temporary blindness. Intellect, 2 for 2 hours after each activation. Lyra's Sacred Burden also progressed. Sacred Burden, Tier 2, healing others drains 50% more of your own stamina. Resolve 2 for 2 hours after each activation. Healing self is 25% less effective. The stakes became impossibly high. They learned to fear death more than any monster. The dungeon wasn't just trying to kill them, it was trying to break them. On the 7th level, a sprawling labyrinth of moving walls and traps, Ilara, trying to disarm a complex runic lock, miscalculated. A flash of lightning erupted, striking her. Ilara, mage, deceased, resurrecting. Resurrection cost, 10% of total gold, 110 gold. Status, success. Warning, dungeon system imprint detected. New permanent curse, flickering magic. Tier 1. Spells have a 10% chance to misfire, affecting a random target or having an unintended effect. Arcane focus, 1 for 1 hour after each activation. Ilara, now with spells that could betray her, felt a cold dread. Her carefully calculated magic was now a gamble. Jax, ever stoic, took the brunt of every physical assault. His health bar would plummet, but he would stubbornly cling to life. He refused to die, knowing the physical curse he would almost certainly receive would cripple his ability to protect the others. But in a desperate battle against a stone basilisk, he made a mistake, mistiming a dodge. The basilisk's stony gaze caught him. He felt his muscles stiffen, his blood turning to sluggish sludge. Jax, warrior, deceased, resurrecting. Resurrection cost, 10% of total gold, 150 gold. Status, success. Warning, dungeon system imprint detected. New permanent curse. Brittle Bones, Tier 1. Taking fall damage or heavy blunt force trauma has a 25% chance to cause a temporary fracture. Defense, 15% for 1 hour. Strength, 1 for 1 hour after each activation. Jax, now a warrior whose very bones could betray. Him felt the crypt's cruel irony. He, the unyielding shield, was now made fragile. The party descended into the lower levels, scarred and burdened, but not broken. They had adapted. They began to strategize their deaths. If a critical trap lay ahead, and only Kaelen could disarm it, but the risk of death was high, they would send him in alone, hoping his next curse would be manageable. If Lyra needed to make a desperate healing surge, knowing her curse would drain her, they would prepare a safe spot for her resurrection. They even found ways to weaponize their curses, albeit subtly. Kaelen's Whispers of the Vault sometimes gave them hints about upcoming traps, despite the disorienting effect. Ilara, with flickering magic, sometimes intentionally misfired. A spell into a cluster of enemies, hoping for a beneficial, chaotic explosion. They learned the crypt had a consciousness, a malevolent sentience that sought to torment them. The monsters became echoes of their failures, the traps designed to exploit their growing debuffs. They found cryptic runes etched on ancient walls. This place consumes despair. Every fall, a feast. Every rise, a tether. On the 10th level, they entered a vast, echoing chamber, illuminated by a single, pulsating orb of black energy. In the center, suspended in shimmering chains, was the Heartstone, a massive obsidian gem radiating raw, corrupting power. But guarding it was not a monster. It was a projection of their greatest fears, fed by the crypt, their past selves, pristine and uncursed, mocking their current broken forms. Crypt challenge: overcome your shadows, fail, and become eternal feed for the crypt. The fight against their own shadows was agonizing. They battled their uncursed selves, who moved with a grace and power they no longer possessed. Kaelen's shadows moved without hesitation. Lyra's radiated pure hope. Ilara's cast perfect spells, and Jax's were invulnerable. Kaelen's Whispers of the Vault flared, the voices of 1,000 dead adventurers screaming for him to give up, to join them in the endless torment. He stumbled, temporarily blinded, but forced himself forward, trusting his other senses. Lyra's sacred burden weighed her down, every heal for Jax draining her vital stamina, but her resolve was hardened by her new awareness of self-sacrifice. She knew her sacrifice had meaning, something her shadow could not comprehend. Ilara, with flickering magic, embraced the chaos. Instead of trying for a perfect fireball, she channeled raw, arcane energy, letting it explode unpredictably, forcing her shadow to react to the unexpected. Jax, despite his brittle bones, endured. He took hits that would have shattered him before, but his true strength now lay not in invulnerability, but in his will to keep going, to fight through the pain. A lesson his shadow had never learned. They won, but at a terrible cost. Lyra, shielding Ilara from a final, shattering blow, fell again. Lyra, paladin, deceased, resurrecting. Resurrection cost, 10% of total gold, 200 gold. Status, success. Warning, dungeon system imprint detected. New permanent curse, eternal burden. Tier 3, healing others drains 100% more of your own stamina. Resolve, 3 for 3 hours after each activation. Healing self is 50% less effective. You periodically feel the urge to sacrifice yourself for others, regardless of tactical advantage, you're returned. Her resolve now a steel cage around a heart that ached for self-immolation. The crypt was trying to turn her compassion into a weapon against her. They reached the Heartstone. It pulsed with dark power, tempting them with promises of power, of removing their curses, of resetting their lives to their unblemished pasts. "It's a lie," Kaelen rasped, his eyes burning. "It's trying to trick us, to feed on our regrets." Aelin had learned something else during her lore hunts. The crypt wasn't just absorbing their despair, it was absorbing their experiences. Every death, every curse, every adaptation. It was not a malevolent being, but an ancient, self-evolving entity designed to distill the essence of heroic struggle, growing more powerful with each adventurer's journey. The Heartstone was not a source of power, but the crypt's core consciousness. Its brain. They couldn't destroy it. They had to break it, to overload it with an experience it couldn't process. Kaelen remembered a forgotten technique, a rogue's gambit, gleaned from a whisper in the vault. A way to overload a magical artifact. It required massive, chaotic energy, and a perfectly executed, synchronized sequence of failures. "We can't destroy it with our strengths," Kaelen declared, his voice firm despite the whispers. "We have to overload it with our weaknesses. With us." Lyra, her resolve now unbreakable despite the urge to sacrifice, focused her healing, not to restore, but to intentionally overcharge Jax, pushing him past his limits, a volatile reservoir of pain and fury. Alara, embracing flickering magic, prepared a chaotic storm of misfired spells aimed at the Heartstone, designed to flood it with unpredictable energy. Jax, with Brittle Bones, would become the conduit. He would take the concentrated, overcharged energy from Lyra, and then, with a controlled, intentional fall, smash his axe into the Heartstone, not with strength, but with a calculated failure that would transfer the chaotic energy. It was a suicidal plan, a symphony of mistakes. But it was their plan. Jax took the overcharged energy, his body screaming, his bones threatening to shatter. He leaped towards the Heartstone. Lyra, ignoring her instinct to protect, gave him one final painful surge. Alara unleashed her chaotic magic, washing the chamber in unpredictable energies. Kaelen, fighting through the blinding whispers, guided. Jax with shouted, desperate instructions. Jax hit the Heartstone, not with a perfect strike, but with a calculated, painful fall, his axe transferring the chaotic surge. Crypt core, overload. Error, unquantifiable chaos detected. Warning, system integrity compromised. New protocol, adventurer choice activated. The Heartstone pulsed, not with dark energy, but with a brilliant white light. The crypt shook, then settled. The curses on their interfaces began to fade. They weren't gone, but they were no longer oppressive. They were now choices. Each curse became a unique perk they could choose to activate, with a drawback, but also with a benefit. Whispers of the Vault, Tier 3, active perk. Gain insight into hidden truths and future events, 50% chance. Drawback, intellect, 3 for 3 hours. Cooldown, 12 hours. Sacred Burden, Tier 3. Active perk, healing others. Generates a burst of empowering energy for both healer and target, 50% chance. Drawback, healing self is 75% less effective. Cooldown, 24 hours. Flickering Magic, Tier 3. Active perk. Spells have a 25% chance to critical hit, dealing double damage. Drawback, 25% chance to misfire with unintended chaotic effect. Cooldown, instant. Brittle Bones, Tier 3. Active perk. When taking fall damage or heavy blunt force trauma, gain adaptive resilience, defense plus 25% for 30 minutes. Drawback, 50% chance to cause temporary fracture. Cooldown, 6 hours. They had not eliminated their weaknesses. They had mastered them. The crypt had not been destroyed. It had been reprogrammed by their refusal to be broken. It was still a dungeon, but now it offered choices. It offered true challenge, true reward, and true freedom from endless torment. They emerged from the Echoing Crypt, Not unblemished heroes, but scarred and changed, their interfaces flickering with the tools of their hard-won chaotic wisdom. They were living proof that the greatest strength was not to avoid failure, but to embrace it, learn from it, and turn it into the ultimate weapon. They had come to conquer a dungeon, and instead, they had become its new, unoptimized masters.